Muslims around the world are suffering. From China to Kashmir, to Syria, and Lebanon. And in many other countries. In America, Muslim students struggle to find good schools that are strong in the Islamic knowledge. Help the Association of Islamic Charitable Projects support and strengthen our Muslim communities. Donate generously this Ramadan for the benefit of your Muslim brothers and sisters. Visit gofundme.com/AICP fund.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. We start with the name of Allah. We praise and thank Allah for all of the endowments He bestowed without Allah being obligated to give anything. And we ask Allah to raise the rank of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and to protect his nation from what he feared for his nation. Thereafter, in the previous lesson, we started mentioning invalidators of the prayer. We talked about that speaking the speech of the people invalidates the prayer. I mean, for one to do that during the prayer invalidates the prayer, the minimum of which is one meaningful letter, for one to say even one letter that itself carries a meaning, or even as few as two letters if they don't carry a meaning. Thus, if one said one letter that does not at all carry a meaning, then this would not invalidate the prayer. And we mentioned that many moves in the prayer that are not part of the prayer. Of course, we're not talking about the bowing and the standing and the prostration and the sitting between the prostrations and at the end. These are movements of the prayer. But three consecutive moves that are not a part of the prayer, for one to do them in the prayer invalidates the prayer. And some scholars said that three consecutive moves is not enough to invalidate the prayer. Rather, it would take enough consecutive moves to equal the duration of one cycle of the prayer. That is the amount of consecutive moves that invalidate. And they took that from hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which the Prophet alaihi salatu wasalam opened a door for his wife Aisha while he was in the prayer and continued in the prayer. And they understood from that this gives the impression that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam moved more than three moves to do that. And so they considered three moves is not enough for the prayer to be invalidated. God willing, we will continue mentioning additional invalidators of the prayer. The Sheikh, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him, said that performing an excessive move invalidates the prayer. So Even one excessive move invalidates the prayer without there being a need to be two or three of them. An example of that is for one to leap during the prayer. And this is one movement, but it's considered excessive. So if a person did that during the prayer, then this would invalidate the prayer. Another matter that invalidates the prayer is adding an extra integral of action. There are certain integrals of action, like bowing in the prayer, like making sujood in the prayer. If a person added another one, they added one to the prayer that's not of the prayer, then this would invalidate the prayer. Like for someone to bow twice in one cycle of the Fajr prayer, or any one of the 5 obligatory prayers. In the 5 obligatory prayers, there is one bowing per rak'ah, one bowing per cycle. So a person does not intentionally bow 2 times in one cycle. If a person intentionally bowed more than once in one cycle, then their prayer would be invalidated. They were standing, they recited the Fatiha, they bowed, they stood back up for al-i'tidal, and then they bowed again while remembering that they already bowed, then this would invalidate the prayer. Or for one to prostrate 3 times on purpose. For example, they prostrate, they sit, they prostrate, they sit up, then they prostrate a 3rd time, remembering that they have already prostrated twice. This likewise will invalidate the prayer. If a person repeated a verbal integral of the prayer, this would not invalidate the prayer. Like, what is an example of a verbal integral of the prayer? To recite the Fatiha. It's an integral. A person has to do it for the validity of the prayer. If a person recited the Fatiha and then recited it again, even if they recited it 4 times, for example, this alone would not invalidate the prayer. And even if they did 4 recitations of the Fatiha in just one cycle of the prayer, and they recited it while standing, then recited again and again and again, this is not an invalidator of the prayer, because the extra integral that invalidates the prayer is the integral of action. The 5th invalidator of the prayer that the Sheikh mentioned is for one to perform even one move with the purpose of playing. For one to intend by that move play, this invalidates the move, invalidates the prayer. So unlike the 3 moves, and if a person performed 3 consecutive moves according to some scholars, or enough moves that equal 1 rak'ah of the prayer, the duration of 1 rak'ah of the prayer, this invalidates the prayer if it takes that many moves to invalidate the prayer if those moves weren't with the intention of playing and those moves weren't excessive. Because if the move was excessive, then that invalidates the prayer even if it were only 1 move. Likewise, if the move was for the purpose of playing, then that invalidates the prayer even if it were only 1 move. However, the Sheikh mentioned that if one smiled during the prayer and it wasn't for the intention of playing, then their prayer would not be invalidated. Likewise, if one, while praying, rubbed the head of a child to comfort them, and it wasn't for the intention of playing with the child, then this also would not invalidate the prayer. Of course, the person would not do 3 consecutive moves. According to some scholars, it would not be permissible to do 3 consecutive moves. As for moving the fingers of the hand, then if a person did that while the palm itself stayed stationary, so they moved the fingers, but the palm itself was stationary, then this does not invalidate the prayer even if there were many moves. If a person moved the fingers of the fingers of the hand, but the palm itself was stationary, then even if it was a lot of moves, this would not invalidate the prayer. Likewise, moving one's eyelids, just moving the eyelids does not invalidate the prayer. Moving the tongue, it does not invalidate the prayer. moving the ears for the one who's able to do that, it also does not invalidate the prayer. Likewise, if one undid a button on their garment, they moved their fingers but didn't move the palm of their hand, then this would not invalidate the prayer, even if they did that a lot. Even if it was a lot of movement of the fingers, but the palm was still, then this would not invalidate the prayer. Or if they fastened a button, if they undid a button, or if they fastened a button, also moving the fingers while the palm itself was still, then this would not invalidate the prayer. And this is, of course, as long as this wasn't done with the intention of play. Then the Sheikh mentioned that eating and drinking invalidate the prayer, except if one forgot that they were in the prayer and it was a little amount. So, eating and drinking invalidates except what was done out of forgetfulness that one was in the prayer. If a person forgot that they were praying and it was only a small amount that was consumed, then this would not invalidate the prayer. However, if it became a large amount, then this would invalidate the prayer even if they were forgetful while doing that. The Sheikh mentioned that, likewise, the prayer is invalidated if one vomited purposely or was overcome by that. If they were in the prayer and they regurgitated something, then this would invalidate their prayer even if it wasn't on purpose, even if they were overcome by that. Likewise, if one belched and regurgitation reached the apparent part of the mouth, then this also would invalidate the prayer, even if one did not swallow it. However, if one doubted, did something exit from the inner cavity or not? And did it reach the mouth, what's apparent part of the mouth, or not, when he belched, then the prayer itself is not invalidated by the mere doubt. Also among the invalidators of the prayer is the intention of interrupting the prayer, for one to intend to interrupt the prayer. Also, what invalidates is to make interrupting the prayer contingent on something, meaning for one to determine in their mind, intending that if a certain occurrence takes place, that they will invalidate the prayer. Likewise, for one to hesitate in their mind about invalidating the prayer, like for one to go back and forth, should I invalidate it or should I continue? Should I invalidate it or should I continue? Each one of these three matters invalidates the prayer. As for the one who intends to invalidate the prayer, then their prayer is invalidated immediately. One intends in their heart to invalidate the prayer, then their prayer like that is invalidated. And it's prohibited to invalidate the prayer before one completes it without a religiously valid excuse. As for the one who makes interrupting the prayer contingent on the occurrence of an event, this is like for someone to say, if such and such happens, I will interrupt it. If the phone rings, I will interrupt the prayer. If there's a knock at the door, I will interrupt the prayer. When a person makes this intention, then their prayer would be immediately invalidated, and the invalidation doesn't occur at that time that the person determined in their mind. So if a person intended that if the doorbell rings, I will invalidate the prayer, then even if the doorbell doesn't ring, their prayer would be invalidated. Their prayer would be immediately invalidated once they made that firm intention. Or if they said, if there's a knock at the door, then I will invalidate my prayer, then even if there's no knock at the door during their prayer would be immediately invalidated once they made that firm intention. Likewise, among the invalidators of the prayer is what we said, hesitating. If a person says, will I interrupt it or will I continue it? Should I stay? Continue performing the prayer or interrupt it? Going back and forth in their mind like this, then their prayer would be immediately invalidated upon having this hesitation. Then, finally, among the invalidators of the prayer is for one to complete an integral while the doubt persists in one's mind whether or not one established the intention to perform the prayer during the opening saying of Allahu Akbar. One doubts in their mind, did I have the intention when I said Allahu Akbar to start the prayer? And that doubt persists upon the completion of an integral of the prayer. Likewise, even if that doubt did not persist for a long time, even if that doubt did not persist upon the completion of an integral of the prayer, but it did last for a long time, then this would likewise invalidate the prayer. So if one doubted in their mind, did I intend during the opening saying of Allahu Akbar or not? Did I make the intention? Did I establish the intention? And while they had that doubt, and it continued until the completion of an integral. They completed the integral of the prayer and they were still doubting about that, then this person's prayer would be invalid. The Sheikh mentioned that an example of this is for him to recite the Fatiha while doubting. Then he completes the Fatiha while the doubt still persists. The Fatiha is an integral of the prayer, so because that doubt persisted in his heart upon the completion of an integral of the prayer, then the prayer would be invalidated due to that. However, if the doubt subsided, if the doubt went away before the completion of an integral, or before the duration became long, before the length of the doubt became long, then the prayer would not be invalidated. This means that if the doubt came and went quickly, then that alone does not invalidate the prayer. The Sheikh mentioned that as for the one who thinks that he is performing other than the prayer that one entered into and is actually performing, this does not invalidate the prayer, even if one completed the prayer in that state. So for example, if a person prayed Dhuhr, he started praying Dhuhr. He entered into the Dhuhr prayer with the intention of Dhuhr. And then while praying, he forgot, and so he got mixed up. He thought he was praying Asr. And he continued and completed the prayer in that state. Then this does not invalidate his prayer. Then after mentioning the invalidators of the prayer, the Sheikh, before mentioning the integrals themselves, talked about another important issue, and this is the conditions for the rewardability of the prayer. Because a person might pray a prayer and it be valid, he fulfilled all the necessary conditions, he fulfilled all the necessary integrals. However, he receives no reward for that prayer. So now the Sheikh is mentioning about the conditions for one to receive reward in the prayer, and that if one left out any of these three matters, that even if the prayer was valid, the person would get no reward for that prayer. So he said, in addition to what has been mentioned, the prayer is rewardable if the following conditions are satisfied. One performs the prayer for the sake of Allah the Exalted only. One's food, clothing, and prayer surface is halal, is permissible. And third, that one would have the khushu', that one would fear Allah the Exalted, even if it was only for one moment within the prayer. Meaning that one must fear Allah at least for one moment to receive reward in the prayer. And if they don't fear Allah at all, not even for a moment, then they would not receive any reward for the prayer. Explaining that, he mentioned that this is a clarification for the conditions for the acceptability of the prayer, and these are different than the conditions for the validity of the prayer. Those aforementioned conditions, when we said the person needs to be in a state of purification from the major and the minor ritual impurity and from najis filth on his clothing, his body, and his prayer surface, and that one must face the qibla, and that they must know that the prayer time is in, and they have to be Muslim, and they have to be at a stage of mental discrimination, this stage of mental development where they understand when addressed and are able to answer based on their comprehension, and that they must know that the obligatory prayer is obligatory and not deem an integral of the prayer as optional, and that they must cover the unlawful nakedness. These matters are conditions for the validity of the prayer. The prayer would not be valid without them. However, a person might perform a valid prayer but get no reward for it. So here he's mentioning the conditions so that someone would get reward. As for what is mentioned in this section, they are the conditions for receiving reward. If they do not occur, the prayer would still be valid, however, without reward. So the first of these conditions, as he mentioned, is sincerity, which is that one does one's prayer seeking reward from Allah, the Exalted only. That is, seeking with one's prayer, obeying the order of Allah, not the people praising him. Because, of course, the one who seeks the praise of the people by his act of worship, he would get no reward for his worship, and actually he would acquire a big sin, which is called insincerity, which is for one to do the act of worship seeking the praise of the people. Then he said, for one's food, clothing, and place of prayer to be permissible. Thus, whoever's food, clothing, or prayer service is prohibited, then they receive no reward in the prayer. So if a person, for example, ate haram meat, then while that meat is in their belly before it has been digested, they would not receive reward for their prayer. Or if a person, for example, stole someone's food, the food, its base judgment is that it's halal, but the person stole it, for example, then this would also be haram. Or for a person to earn haram money and then buy food with their haram money and then consume that food, this is also prohibited. So then this person, they wouldn't get reward for the prayer that they perform while they're in that state, and while that food is in their belly before it digested. Or if a person wore prohibited clothing during the prayer, like an item, a garment that was stolen, and then they wore it during the prayer, they would receive no reward in the prayer. And likewise, if the prayer surface was prohibited, like for one to take someone else's home by force, for someone to kick someone out of their own house unrightfully, and then live in their house having taken it by force, this is prohibited. So if they perform the prayer while in that dwelling, then they would not receive reward for the prayer. Likewise, among the conditions for the rewardability of the prayer is to have the presence of mind in the prayer, meaning having the reverent fear of Allah in the prayer, even for a moment. That's the minimum. That's the minimum amount that a person would have to fear Allah the Exalted to receive some reward for the prayer. And the more reverent fear that one has in one's heart for Allah during the prayer, then the more reward they will receive. The one without this reverence, not even for a moment in his prayer, exits the prayer without reward. Allah the Exalted said in the Quran, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ. This khushu' is a deed of the heart. Allah the Exalted said that the believers were successful, those who had the khushu' in their prayer. The khushu' is a deed of the heart, and it is achieved in different ways. What it means is for one to have the reverent fear of Allah the Exalted in one's heart. A person might have the khushu' in the prayer or outside of the prayer, but for one to have it in the prayer is a condition for the rewardability of the prayer. Among the ways that a person may arrive at having khushu' in their heart is to think about death a lot, especially upon entering into the prayer. When one goes into the prayer, they enter into the prayer, they would think about death. They would say to themselves, perhaps this will be my final prayer. This is why the Imam says, pray as if this was your last prayer. He would say, Sallu salat al-muwaddi'. Yani pray the prayer of the one who is saying farewell. That is, pray as if it is your last prayer. Because this would help a person reach a state of having the reverent fear for Allah the Exalted. If a person was praying and he knew, for example, or he felt that he's going to die right after that, then how would his prayer be? And wouldn't he be more focused in his prayer? Wouldn't he have sharp focus in his prayer? Wouldn't he be thinking about Allah the Exalted, His perfect attributes, and that Allah Ta'ala has power over everything, and that Allah Ta'ala is the one who forgives the sins, and wouldn't he be seeking mercy from Allah and goodness from Allah in that situation? And if a person felt that he was going to die right after that prayer, then yes, he would be more focused in that prayer, God willing. And the meaning of khushu' that one needs to have in the prayer, this reverent fear, is to fear Allah by feeling love for Allah and His aggrandizement. And that occurs by one attributing to Allah those perfect attributes that befit Him. So if a person had this reverent fear of Allah the Exalted in their prayer, then inshallah they would get the reward if all of the other conditions were met. And with that, the Sheikh finished mentioning the the conditions for the validity of the prayer, the invalidators of the prayer, and the conditions for the rewardability of the prayer. We ask Allah the Exalted to increase our knowledge and make us among those who implement it fully and teach it to others, so that we would gain a great reward in this life and continue receiving reward even in our graves. Walhamdulillah wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. La ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
قلوبنا هامت بذكر الله 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 الله. قلوبنا هامت بذكر الله 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 الله. قلوبنا هامت بذكر الله 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 الله.
Muslims around the world are suffering. From China to Kashmir, to Syria, and Lebanon. And in many other countries. In America, Muslim students struggle to find good schools that are strong in the Islamic knowledge.
أنت يا محمد تعلم التوحيد لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله.
Help the Association of Islamic Charitable Projects support and strengthen our Muslim communities. Donate generously this Ramadan for the benefit of your Muslim brothers and sisters. Visit gofundme.com/AICP Fund.